If you're thinking about buying your own home or an investment property in Brisbane in 2024, then this video is packed with some of the top reasons to consider investing in Brisbane this year. Now, the first reason I personally own investment property in Brisbane is when I looked at the long-term history. In fact, I found an incredible report by holy.com.au where they looked at 50 years worth of data in Brisbane. Now, looking at that 50-year period, when I looked at the total return divided by the number of years, I found that Brisbane had averaged 9.7% per annum between 1976 and 2016. When I went on to look at the same data for Sydney, Melbourne and Perth, what I found is that Sydney had actually done 9.6%, Melbourne had done 9.5% and Perth had done 8.2%, which completely surprised me that Brisbane had actually been the top performing market of Australia's 4 best markets in the last 50 years.
Now, looking into some of the data from Simon Priestley, he found that in the 50 years up to 2022, the combined capital cities had averaged 8.2% across Australia. So this supports what we believe, that investing in capital cities over regional markets or metro markets over regional markets is definitely the way to go.
Now, another reason we both love Brisbane is the coming Olympic Games. Now, as a property geek, I wanted to go back and see what previous Olympic Games had done for cities around the world. When I looked at Sydney between 1997 and 2003, house prices had actually gone up 97%. Now, I've got no idea what's going to happen over the next 8 or 9 years as we lead up to the Olympics, but I know the jobs, the population growth, the infrastructure and the speculation that can't be bad for the market.
In the same time in Sydney, from 1997 to 2003, rents were also up 100% in that 6-year period. So really good things to come around the Olympics and off the back of the Olympics down there.
Now, there's been some incredibly positive media coming out in the last 12 months. Articles from the Australian Financial Review, the SBS, and even the ABC has jumped on the bandwagon, with each of these different sources expecting extremely strong capital growth in Australia's capital cities over the next 18 months. Now, one of the articles that piqued our interest recently was one from the Australian Financial Review, where 7 of Australia's leading analysts, including those from the major banks, were looking at different parts of the Brisbane market between now and the Olympic Games. Now, what was interesting in this article in the Financial Review is that all 7 of the analysts looked at the average 600K property, whether that's in North, South or West Brisbane, and all of them are predicting those house prices to go to somewhere between $900 and $1.1 million between now and the Olympic Games. When the same analysts looked at some of the beachside suburbs on the north, eastern and southern beaches of the city, they expected the average price from 2022 to go from about 700K to somewhere between 1.3 and 1.5 mil by the Games. Now, us, those guys, you, none of us have the opportunity to predict the future clearly, but when those sorts of articles come out, it creates demand and positive sentiment. And when there's positive sentiment and easy access to credit or money, which is the next part of the cycle, we see prices jump.
I love it. Super exciting to see what's to come in the lead up to the 2032 Olympics. Westpac is speculating that there's going to be about $17 billion worth of benefits to the Australian economy in the lead up to and off the back of the Olympics, with about 9 to 10 billion of that flooding into southeast Queensland and Brisbane.
Now, after catching up with Phil recently for some lunch and then a long dinner, I was picking his brain about what we can expect leading up. And he was saying that based on his research of the last 3 real estate cycles, and if you're interested in these cycles, we talk about these heaps more in many of our other YouTube videos. But Phil was basically saying that some of Australia's markets are already fully priced in, that have obviously doubled in value since the last GFC. But there's many suburbs that he was looking at throughout Australia in Australia's major metro markets where we could see between 30 and 70% price growth leading into the next GFC.
Now, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, we're expected to see a $5 million over the next 20 years. This get it out, Crystal. According to the ABS, over the next 20 years, the population in Brisbane is expected to get to 5 million people. On top of the population growth we're going to see just in Brisbane, 75% of all of Australia's job growth, population growth and income growth is expected across the three capital cities on the east coast of Australia. So Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane are going to see the bulk of that growth.
You know, I think that's one of the major reasons why we're so personally interested in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, because that population, that job growth and that infrastructure growth or income growth is really what drives demand and that drives prices up over time. Now, we're looking at some data from SQM Research at the moment. Obviously, Australia is massively undersupplied, almost Australia-wide from a property perspective at the moment. And that's off the back of, a whole lot of population growth from overseas, a whole lot of students, and a whole lot of people moving around to different parts of Australia since the start of COVID. But Brisbane right now, on average, has a rental vacancy rate of below 1%, where anything below 2% would be considered undersupplied. So when it's a 1%, that's a case where rents are rising quite rapidly. And unfortunately, many people are sleeping in cars.
Again, according to the ABS, since the start of COVID, Queensland's been the fastest growing population in Australia. Off the back of this, the Queensland Deputy Premier just last month announced the need for 900,000 new dwellings across southeast Queensland. The bulk of that going into the Gold Coast region, Brisbane and the Moreton Bay region. And that's expected over the next 20 years. So to support with the population growth we've already seen and the population growth that's coming, there's a huge demand for additional dwellings across the city and the surrounding regions.
Yeah, I was actually just reading CBA's State of State reports, and Brisbane again, or Queensland again, is the #1 state in Australia in terms of leading the way on things that they believe will drive population growth, job growth, as well as house price growth. You know, at the end of the day, there's a whole bunch of great reasons that we've already talked about in this video why Queensland and Brisbane look so good in 2024, 25 and 26. But in reality, the #1 reason there's two reasons actually why we like it so much at the moment. It is absolutely dirt cheap compared to Sydney, Melbourne, the Mornington Peninsula, Geelong, Central Coast, Newcastle and Wollongong. And secondly, it's not like those other markets at all at the moment because the incomes are so high, the job growth is so high, the population growth is so high, where in all of those other markets I just mentioned, prices have literally doubled or even done better than that since the last GFC. And there are suburbs in Brisbane right in the centre of the city that have doubled as well. But there's these handful of suburbs, or there's about 30 suburbs this year that we've been looking at that over the same period of time since the last GFC have really only done 50, maybe 60% growth. So there is massive upside in the city if you know where to look and you don't approach it as one market, but a series of suburbs and markets within Brisbane.
It's super exciting to see. Obviously, we're firm believers in the Brisbane market. It's nice to see that some of these other people are jumping on board as well and supporting that. But boots on the ground, we're seeing an extremely hot market right now. Me and the team have helped investors buy over 900 properties over the last 8-9 years in these markets. And right now, things are more competitive than they've ever been, or getting up to that competition that we saw in the COVID era. We're seeing houses sell within a couple of days of hitting the market in the right suburbs. We're seeing properties sell for well over the asking prices in a lot of instances. We're seeing multiple offers on most properties, lots of mums and dads at open homes. So we're looking at 30 to 50 people showing up to the first open home, selling in that first weekend. And most of those people that are looking are your mum and dad investors in these types of suburbs.
For those of you who are seriously looking at Brisbane and looking to buy in the next 3 to 12 months, Crystal and I would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. Just jump over to www.pumpedonproperty.com, click that free strategy session button in, and we can talk about where you are right now, where you'd like to be longer term. We can educate you from our experiences of buying over $450 million worth of investment property for ourselves and our clients over the last 9 years in Brisbane. And then you can take that information and go and absolutely smash it on your own. Or potentially you might be able to become one of the extremely small number of clients that we choose to work with each month. But either way, we wish you absolutely all the best on your journey to financial freedom and financial peace in your future.
Woo! That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Getting cool, bro. Yeah.
Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. Look at that. So nice, eh? Oh.